At 7,000 kilometers, the Nile is Africa's longest river. Its waters run through 11 countries, and for the 280 million people living along its banks, the Nile is vital. But a mega project, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, has triggered a major dispute in the region. Diplomatic relations between Sudan, Ethiopia and Egypt have been tense for nearly 10 years over the construction of the hydropower dam that broke ground in 2011. But no agreement has been reached. And in a time and region where water is scarce, a power struggle for control of the Nile has broken out. While Addis Ababa says the dam is crucial to its economic development, Egypt calls it an existential threat. Cairo is concerned the dam will reduce its share of Nile waters. Sudan fears the project will increase the risk of flooding and affect the safe operation of its own dams on the river. Khartoum requested the United Nations, African Union, European Union and the United States mediate in the dispute, and its welcomed efforts by the UAE. The dam is now more than 3/4 complete and is expected to reach full power generating capacity in 2023. So can Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt find a diplomatic solution to their dispute, or will escalate even further? Sudan's irrigation minister, Yasser Abbas, talks to Al Jazeera. Yasser Abbas, Sudan's Minister of Irrigation and Water Resources, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. My first question to you, sir, is about the latest situation now. Could you explain to our viewers where we stand now in terms of the dispute with Ethiopia over the dam?
The situation right now, there is no progress since last January, 10th of January, when we had the last meeting of the tripartite negotiations under the auspices of the African Union. Since then, we requested at that time to give a role to the African Union, and the other two countries, Egypt and Ethiopia, refused or preferred to go directly to the negotiations among the three countries. And Sudan mentioned that the tripartite negotiations led to no conclusion. So we proposed to give more role to the African Union. So since 10th of January, there is no progress.
Sir, but the African Union has been supervising these talks, I understand. South Africa has been involved even before South Africa, and now the Democratic Republic of Congo. The African Union has been involved in these talks. Why do you think you want now the situation to go back to where it stood before, when no results have been achieved?
We wanted to strengthen the African Union process because, as you said, the African Union has led the process from June 2020 to January 2021, but couldn't reach conclusion. Now, what we are proposing from Sudan's side is to strengthen the African Union process by first changing the role of the observers, that is the United States of America and the European Union, and the African Union itself, to mediators and facilitators, and then to invite a fourth party, the United Nations, so it become a quartet, to give more strength to the African Union process and to give more leverage, political leverage, to reach a kind of an amicable agreement among the three countries.
Well, Ethiopia is unhappy with this initiative to bring people from outside Africa to resolve an African problem. They think that bringing the UN, the EU, and the United States, it's almost a provocation because they believe in Africa. They think Africans can resolve this dispute. And also they remember, not only the Ethiopians, but also other African countries remember that Sudan and Egypt, at a certain time in the past, refused to cooperate with the Nile Basin Initiative countries, the 11 countries, when they issued a draft agreement. Sudan and Egypt did not sign it. At the same time that you want the African Union to be involved, you also don't seem to trust the African Union states or countries. This is from the perspective of Ethiopia. They want this conflict to be resolved within Africa. What's the problem with that?
We also are African. We also want it to be resolved by African Union. And that is the reason why in June 2020, we have agreed to bring back the case from the Security Council. Sudan already believe African solutions to African problems. And we started in June 2020 our insistence to give a role to the African Union, to give them a leadership role. And you remember that we also insisted to give a role to the experts, because the expert prepared a very well written report already in July, in the second bureau, in the second meeting of the African Bureau, 21st of July last year. We insisted from Sudan to give them a role in the process. Unfortunately, they did not give them a role. So what was the conclusion is that instead of resolving only outstanding issues, which was only like 10% of the whole agreement, which means that 90% of the agreement were already agreed to by the three countries, the remaining 10%, we said, we proposed to give them, to give the expert a chance to give their opinion. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And Ethiopia already announced that it will go to unilateral filling by July this year. So there is really very much time constraint. That is why we proposed to have a mediation, not observation, not observers like before. And already the European Union and the United States of America, they were already part of the previous round under the African Union. So what is new here is only we invited the United Nations to bring these global perspectives, the global experience in international river basin. We are not taking the case from Africa to our side, no. We are strengthening the African Union-led process. Still, this quartet is led by the chair of the African Union, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo, while European Union, United States, as I mentioned, they were already there before. The new partner is the United Nations. So I think it's not fair that Ethiopia is saying that we are internationalizing the case. No, we are strengthening the African Union process.
Why do you think Ethiopia is refusing this strengthened role by the African Union and also the role of the United States, the EU, and the other organizations?
I think it's not fair from Ethiopia to reject this proposal. I also believe that if they are really genuine into reaching an agreement, they could have an accept this quartet, because they will not favor Sudan or they will not favor any country. They will attempt to help the three countries reach an amicable agreement. So I think it's not logical, it's not realistic for Ethiopia to reject it.
When Ethiopia says many times that it is not going to do anything that will hurt the interests of Sudan and Egypt, we know that the Ethiopian Prime Minister has reiterated this phrase, they will not do anything that will hurt Sudan or Egypt. Why don't you believe them?
No, I think it is time to change the words into actions, because they said so last year, and already with without prior notification, without even informing us, last July they have stored a small volume of water of 4 billion meter cube unilaterally, and that already caused interruption to the drinking water supply of Khartoum city. This year they are planning to store 3 times more in the same way without notification. So how come we can believe? I think it is time now for the Ethiopia to change the words of not hurting, to make them into actions, to get into a good faith negotiations, to reach to an agreement which is acceptable for Ethiopia, acceptable for Sudan, and also acceptable for Egypt.
Well, you said the retention of just 4 billion cubic meters last year has affected the amount of water available in Khartoum. That's very dangerous. That means that in the future there will be much more problems, because this year they are talking about 13 billion cubic meters in July.
Correct. That is the main concern of Sudan, because we have a Roseris dam very close to the Gerd. And Roseris is only 10% in size compared to the Gerd. And all our irrigation system, drinking water supply, downstream Roseris, along the Blue Nile, and also along the main Nile depends on these waters. So if you make this kind of storage without notification, without an agreement, that will really put those what we say, half of the Sudanese population who are living in the central Sudan, along the Blue Nile and also along the main Nile, that is about 20 million people, will put them into very high risk. And we have seen last year, I mean, it's very small volume, and it's already affected the drinking water supply in Khartoum for a couple of days.
So what's the amount of water that is safe to retain behind the dam so that Sudan and Egypt do not suffer?
The issue is not about the volume of water, because even in the draft agreement on these technical issues, the three countries will already agreed to it. Even for last year, the volume was very little. 4 billion meter cube was very little volume. But the issue is that they have stored it in a very short time, in only 1 week. If they have stored it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or even if we were notified, we could have taken mitigation measures. So the issue is reaching a binding agreement of data exchange, informing us as downstream that we are going to fill this so much in so much time, so that we get prepared.
Ethiopia says it's not going to accept to be bound by a legal agreement about the years of drought. In case of years of prolonged drought, they say that it is going to affect their own electricity production if they release the amount of water that Sudan and Egypt need. Aren't you ready to understand the problem in Ethiopia? Once they start a certain level of hydropower production, they can't go down. It will affect the situation in the country, and they will go back to the pre-dam situation of need and poverty, which is a reason behind the construction of the dam. So Ethiopia has its own reasons for what it is doing.
We fully understand the concern of Ethiopia, but let me tell you something, is that the problem now is not the technical part of the agreement, because that is almost, when we say in Sudan, even last year we mentioned it, that 90% of issues has been resolved. These are mainly technical issues. These are mainly how to fill the dam, when to fill the dam. So what remains on the technical issue is very minor part of it, what we call prolonged period of dry years. I mean, in the future, if something like that, and that for Sudan is not a big concern. Now, what remains, which is the remaining 10%, is the legal part of the agreement. Is it binding agreement, or it is only rules for filling an operation? If there is a conflict, how can we resolve that conflict? Shall we go to the African Union, or shall we go to arbitrations? And what is the relation of filling an operation of the GERD with water sharing? These are the main issues of the negotiations. It's not the technical part. Because surprisingly now we hear from Ethiopia about water sharing has to be part of the filling and operation. It was not the case before. The filling and operation of the GERD, one key reference to that is the Declaration of Principle signed in 2015 by the three countries.
Well, many people are commenting on this shift in Sudan's position with regards to the dispute over the dam. Sudan hasn't been talking like this just 2 years ago. I've been following the situation, and Sudan was very much pro the construction of the dam. Sudan has always reiterated, even Sudanese experts we talked to, they reiterated their belief that this dam is not going to affect Sudan. Sudan has nothing to fear. But now, since last year, we're hearing a new kind of position, new kind of commentary and threats to Sudan that you have talked about several times this year. What's the explanation of this shift? Suddenly you realize that this dam is dangerous for Sudan?
You are very much correct. We also get these questions many times here in Sudan. They ask us, you were supporting the dam, why you are changing position? I mean, this is true. Sudan's position has never changed. From the beginning, we supported the dam. We supported Ethiopia for two reasons. Number one, it is the right of Ethiopia to build dams for hydropower generations, like we have dams in Sudan, or Egypt also has dams. And the second reason is that we are seeing some benefits from this dam. Of course, it has also negative impacts, but it has also positive impacts. Now, the issue is that all these positive impacts can change automatically to very high risk if there is no agreement. So our point is the same. We are supporting Ethiopia, but on the condition to reach an agreement on the filling and operation. And that is already started long time ago in the Declaration of Principle in 2015, when the three countries agreed that the dam will continue constructions, but then the three countries, they should have agree on how to fill and operate the dam. And when there is a delay on reaching this agreement, Sudan now is raising its concern, serious concern, because of the proximity of this big dam, mega dam, 10 times bigger than our small dam, just at the border. So it is really not changing position, but putting things in the right context. Sudan supports the GERD, Sudan supports the dam, based on the condition of reaching an agreement.
You mentioned the word proximity, and it reminded me also of some commentary that is going on now about the new proximity, political proximity between Sudan and Egypt being the driver behind this new shift in Sudan's position. Now that the new government in Sudan is closer to Egypt politically, you have shifted away from your previous support for the dam. So politics is involved in this, people say. What's your reply to that?
I think this is not correct. The Sudan government came after a very famous revolutions led by the very brave women and men who overthrew the dictator of al-Bashir, ruled Sudan for 30 years. So the transitional government in Sudan now is supported by the Sudanese people. It's not driven by any country else. That's what we also see in the media. They say, you change positions because you are more aligned with Egypt. That's not the reality. We change positions because we want to protect the Sudan interests. Sudan supports the GERD, that's true, but it has to be based on an agreement. And now we appreciate the position of Egypt of supporting this quartet, because we believe that if each country is genuine to reach an agreement, should not reject this quartet approach, because we believe that it will be fair to support the three countries to reach an agreement.
Yeah, but when we look at the situation, Sudan has always kept this position of neutrality between Ethiopia and Egypt. But you talked about being happy with the Egyptian positions, Egypt being happy with the Sudanese position. You have the same position with regards to what should be done going forward. But it's more than that. The Ethiopians are talking about a kind of military and security alliance being struck between Sudan and Egypt. At the same time that you are talking about peace negotiations, you are striking deals, you are organizing military exercises with the Egyptians, the Sudanese military and the Egyptian military, meetings going on between the chiefs of staff of the two countries, Egypt declaring that it is ready to support Sudan in any situation. I mean, from the Ethiopian perspective, at the same time that you are calling for peaceful negotiations to go on, they see a situation of preparation for something else. It's the recent agreement between the two countries, Sudan and Egypt, the military agreement, security agreement, is a very clear warning to Ethiopia. It's a shot across the bow, seen from the Ethiopian side. What's going on here? Are you, sending a message to Ethiopia that you could resort to violence or to war in case the negotiations fail?
No, I don't think that is a message. That is a message we are sending to Ethiopia. You know, this border dispute is not the spreading of the Sudanese army in its own territory in Al-Fashaga. I mean, everyone knows that. That is something completely different and separate from the GERD negotiations. Sudan still believes that it is possible to reach an amicable agreement, even in this short period, only if there is a political will from the three countries. And when we propose the quartet, we feel that any country who is genuine, who is sincere, would accept that, would not reject it, because each side, we believe, want to reach an amicable agreement which is fair, binding to each country. So I don't think this military cooperation between Sudan and Egypt is pointed against Ethiopia. No, things are different. The case of the GERD is very clear. We have been negotiating for many years now, and it is Ethiopian dam, we know, it is Ethiopian money, it's Ethiopian soil, but it has been built across a transboundary river basin, which has direct implication on the people living downstream. So that is why we are doing a lot of effort to reach an amicable solution in that direction.
Yeah, that's true. But when we look at the situation now, the security situation between Sudan and Ethiopia, this conflict going on in the Fashaga Triangle has added a complexity, more complexity to the situation. How do you describe the situation on the border? It's very tense, I understand. I mean, is Sudan and Ethiopia, are they now at war or at a situation of mutual peace?
You know that, the Sudanese army is spreading over Sudanese soil. Even Ethiopia knows that, and they also said that. This 1902 agreement and the demarcation of the border signals marks on the border 1903, and also the agreement of 1972, and also the discussion in 2008, all during all this period. Ethiopia also accepts that this is a Sudanese soil. So what happened in Al-Fashaq is just a spreading of the Sudanese army over the Sudanese soil. Now, this is separate from the GERD. The GERD is Ethiopian dam built on Ethiopian soil to generate hydropower for Ethiopia. That is very much correct.
Yeah, how can two countries go on two completely different approaches? A peaceful approach regarding the GERD and an approach of conflict and tension and escalation on the border. They can't go together. The two countries can't deal with these two issues at the same time.
Sudan's position is very clear. We are saying is that in Al-Fashaga area, we are just spreading over our own soil. So according to international law, that is very clear. At the same time, the GERD issue is also, according to international law, is very clear. We are saying Ethiopia has the right to build the dam. According to international law, equitable and reasonable utilization, they have the right. But at the same time, according to the same international law, they have the obligation not to cause significant harm to the downstream. And as I told you, we have very small dam very close. So these are two separate.
Recently, you gave a statement in which you said that if no agreement is reached between Sudan and Ethiopia, Sudan is ready to defend its interests by any means. What did you mean by that?
No, I don't think, I think this is it's not complete. It said Sudan is ready to defend its people with all means according to international law.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, because, we still believe that we can reach an amicable solution through negotiations. And we believe negotiation is the only way to find a solution to this GERD conflict. We believe that we have resolved 90% of the issues. What remains now is requiring a political will from the three countries. Are they ready to reach an agreement or not? That is why we are proposing this quartet to bring to the table the leverage over the three countries so that they can reach an amicable agreement. So I still believe that we can reach an agreement.
Do you see any signs that Ethiopia is about to accept to come to the negotiation table and to accept to sign a binding agreement?
Yes, I think we really hope that Ethiopia comply with international law, because the Blue Nile is not an Ethiopian river, it's an international river. It's transboundary river across a number of countries. Ethiopia has the right to build dams, that's correct. We also supported Ethiopia to build the GERD, but Ethiopia also has the obligation not to cause significant harm. So I think according to international law, Ethiopia is obliged to sign an agreement to exchange data with resources to safeguard the lives of 20 million people living along the Blue Nile. You cannot say, no, I ignore everything, everyone living downstream, and I go ahead doing everything unilaterally. That is not acceptable.
Sir, it seems that Ethiopia is going ahead with the filling of the dam reservoir. And it seems also to me that Ethiopia is going to continue to refuse to sign a binding agreement, at least some observers. I'm just citing some observers. Do you see any prospect of an armed conflict over the Nile?
No, I don't think so. I don't see an armed conflict over the Nile.
What are the guarantees?
You know, water by itself, by nature, I mean, if you see the history of river basin around the world, it's very rare you see a war because of the water. Water by itself, by its nature, is a source of cooperation, not war. You see conflict, you see tension, but not to the limit of war.
Yasser Abbas, Sudan's Minister of Irrigation and Water Resources, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you. Thank you.